Hey there, everyone. My name is Samuel Johnson, and welcome to the Garden Wall Perspectives. And today we shall be discussing episodes 1 and 2 of Over the Garden Wall, The Old Grist Mill, and Hard Times at the Huskin Bee. Now, like with other shows that I've looked at, Over the Garden Wall doesn't really have an origin episode, at least not yet. But it does well in creating it does well in establishing the mood for the series going forward. Case in point, the first shot of this series is of a frog playing the opening theme on a piano. And as he plays the theme and sings, we get shots of these random individuals from across the land, each doing something strange, something that looks mundane in and of itself, but has some kind of air of oddities to it. And case in point, what ultimately wraps all these into a nice little bow is when the frog finishes the song and the opening narration for the series kicks in, as the opening narration talks of a land, a place that not many have seen, a place called the Unknown, a place of wonder, of mystery, and where that few mortal souls have seen. Which is where our series begins proper, as our first episode, The Old Grist Mill, actually opens up with our two main characters, two brothers, or stepbrothers as we learn in later episodes, named Wirt and Greg. Wirt is the older brother, who is, I want to say, a tortured artiste who clearly is trying to be all deep and serious and trying to have a level head on his shoulders, but typically deals with the whole awkward older brother transitionary things, like you know how you are when you're a kid and you're just trying to become mature, but at the same time you're still a kid, so you don't really understand what you're doing. That's what Wirt typically is, and Greg's his annoying younger brother. He's excitable, he's friendly, he's got candy in his pants that he drops along so that they can find their way back. And he has a pet frog that he is trying to think of a name of. Also, he has a kettle on his head. We don't learn what the explanation for that is later, but it's weird even when we do learn it. But the point is, these are our two main characters, and the first time we see them, they are wandering in the woods while Greg is trying to think of a name for the frog. However, as they're walking, Wirt stops them and begins asking questions. Namely, where are they? How did they get there? And where's the path home? Upon realizing that the brothers are lost, Wirt begins, well, obviously freaking out, wanting to know what to do, where they're going to go, how are they going to get back, etc. But ultimately, his thoughts are put on pause as they hear singing off in the wood, and as they go forth, they find a woodsman who is busy chopping up a tree that he has just chopped down. The boys consider going to see him, though are obviously suspicious, though they are interrupted in their spying by a talking bird. They don't really expand much words with it, though Wirt reacts the way a child would typically react if they saw a talking bird, or at least an older child. The hell is that? Obviously, they're given a sense that something is wrong, but as they talk with the bird, they get the woodsman's attention, and the woodsman wants to know who the hell these kids are and what the heck they're doing here. Of course, this causes the bird to fly away, and so when Wirt and Greg admit that they really don't know where they are, and they're just trying to get home, the woodsman tells them that they are in the unknown, and that if they are there, then they are more lost than they realize. As such, the boys, obviously having nowhere to go, end up following the woodsman, and he brings them back to his abode, an old mill that he says that he found and ultimately refurbished for his purposes. You see, the woodsman's job, as he says, is to light a lantern that he carries with him everywhere, and the only wood that will light the lantern properly is the wood of the edelwood tree, which he grinds down and turns into a, well, black oil, which he uses to pour into the lantern. As such, it's his lot in life, and it's one that he ultimately has to do, though it's clear that there's some torture and pain to him that we don't learn until later. But, in the meantime, he does say that the boys can stay with him for as long as they want, or they can leave if they want, though he warns them that if they do leave, they will have to contest with a creature that stalks the unknown. Something called the Beast, who makes it his priority to hunt for children and steal their souls. The boys ultimately are still suspicious of the old man, and Wirt even concocts a plan to potentially knock them out and make a run for it. But as the old man goes off to perform his duties, Wirt ultimately decides, well, maybe we shouldn't do this. After all, he does seem like a nice old man. Maybe we should just kind of stop and reconsider everything, even admitting that the plan was kind of dumb. However, they don't really have a lot of time to think on this as Greg ends up wandering off because he lost his frog, and as he wanders off, he happens to find his frog outside the mill while the old man works. But upon finding the frog, it turns out the frog made a friend, so to speak, as stalking outside the mill is a large wolf with weird glowing eyes. Greg sees this and ends up running back inside, and when Wirt sees him running in with this wolf on his tail, Wirt thinks, holy shit, that's the beast, we gotta be careful. The woodsman ends up hearing the commotion and runs back to the house, and he tells the boys that he'll take care of it, and then Greg knocks him out, because he thinks they're still going with plan A. Wirt told him, no, don't do that, that was a stupid plan, but it's too little too late. As such, they end up running for it, and they manage to run into the mill, and as they run into the mill, Wirt quickly realizes that the wolf came to the mill because, well, he was following Greg, because, as I mentioned earlier, he was dropping candy wherever they went, and when the wolf was obviously following them for the candy, and that's confirmed when, as they're trying to find things to throw at the wolf to keep it off them, they end up throwing some of Greg's candy at it, and it just stops to lap it up. As such, this gives them enough time to run out of the mill and climb on top of it, but by the time the wolf corners them, well, they're kind of out. Thankfully, Greg did have one left, as there was one that was stuck to Wirt's cape, because he's wearing a cape, I didn't mention that. And ultimately, they're able to use it to distract the beast by throwing it into I want to say the turbine, that spinny thing that mills have, and they end up jumping off the mill as it gets caught within it. And sure enough, as it gets, well, squished in it, it ends up spitting out something. It turns out that it actually had swallowed a little turtle that Greg had put a piece of candy on. And upon spitting it out, the wolf falls into the water. It turns out it was just a regular dog. Yeah, we don't really get an explanation for how the turtle turned it into a wolf. Maybe it was a magic turtle. I don't know. But the point is, without the turtle, the wolf is all fine and dandy. Unfortunately, though, the chase in the mill kind of left the whole thing damaged, and any remains of the Edelwood oil that the old man was able to make is now useless. As such, the old man, upon regaining consciousness, is distraught and tells the boys that they just have to leave. As such, Wirt does try to apologize on behalf of him and his brother, but ultimately the old man tells them they still need to go, but he does give them some warning that they need to beware the beast, beware the unknown, and for Greg to give the frog a proper name. As such, the boys wander off, taking his words to heart, and ultimately they ultimately decide they need to find a town based on the old man's advice. As if they can find civilization, they may be able to find a way to get back to their home. So, yeah, that's the first episode there. As for the second episode, how it begins is the boys are still wandering around, and sure enough, they do manage to find some sign of civilization. In this case, a sign for a village called Pottsfield. Wirt is ready to go in there and try and find someone to get them to help them, but as they're wandering, Greg hears someone calling for help. He ends up following that call to a thorn bush, and sure enough, he does find someone in need. The bird from earlier. I'm just going to say her name right now. Her name is Beatrice, and she's caught in the brambles of the thorn bush. Greg ends up letting her go, and Beatrice says that she is honor bound to repay the debt by giving them a favor. In this case, she notes that the boys seem lost without a purpose, and she says that she may know someone that may be able to help them. Hold on, I wrote her name down. She says that there is someone in the unknown that could help them, a woman by the name of Adelaide of the Pasture. And she offers Greg and Wirt a chance to go with her to meet Adelaide, but Wirt is saying, no, I think I'm just going to take my chance with Pottsfield, because he doesn't really know this bird, and it's still weird. She's a talking bird. There is still a bit of weirdness that he has to get over. As such, Beatrice ends up following Greg and Wirt and keeps trying to convince them to go with her, even to the point where she actually tries going to Greg and tries to convince him to ditch Wirt. but they're still not going for it, and eventually the trio, or quartet if you count the frog, end up reaching Pottsfield. However, upon arriving in Pottsfield, they find that it's mysteriously vacant. There are very little people there, and anybody they find, they're giant turkeys. Honestly, probably not the weirdest thing they've seen, considering the wolf and the talking bird, but whatever. Point is, it seems like a ghost town. However, as they're walking around, they do end up hearing a commotion from a local barn, and sure enough, when they go to investigate, they find that there's a party going on, as they see a bunch of people wearing what looks like straw and pumpkins, etc., just in costumes, and are celebrating. What they're celebrating? Well, based on their dialogue, the harvest. And so Greg and Wirt, or more specifically Wirt, decide that maybe they should go in and maybe talk to people, maybe get some advice, although they admit that this is still kind of weird. However, as Wirt begins asking questions of everybody and tries saying, "Hey, I'm just," saying, "Hey, I need some help here," they begin questioning him as they say, "Hey, where's your costume? You seem to be a little early here. Why are you trying?" And when Wirt mentions that they're just passing through, it's like, "What? Wait, you want to leave Pottsfield? No one ever leaves." And so, as people begin asking questions, the party seems to grind to a halt as everybody in the party seems to corner Greg and Wirt, with Beatrice trying to make a run for it before she gets grabbed too. It's then that we see the head of Pottsfield, or at least someone on the council, or on the Pottsfield City Council, which is a giant creature named Enoch. He talks very low and comforting and nice, but his body is like made of all these straw and wave and just kind of streamers and whatever, with his head looking like not a pump. It looks like a pumpkin, but it's like a big burlap sack that looks like a pumpkin with a face drawn on it. It's honestly very unnerving and kind of creepy. But Enoch does seem to be rather cordial, though when he asks Wirt for clarification on the story, Wirt does tell them, "Yeah, we were just passing through. We wandered in, and something I failed to mention is that when they walked into Pottsfield, they stepped on some pumpkins, and they planned to just leave." And it turns out that, well, Enoch thinks that them being here is kind of against the rules, as they openly admitted they destroyed some of their crops, invaded their personal space, and disrupted their party. They kind of deserve to be punished. As punishment for their actions, they are given community service. Yeah, I'm not even kidding. They literally just said their punishment is a few hours of menial labor, which even Ward's like, "Oh, that's not too bad." And sure enough, it really is that. There's nothing added on top of it, no added tortures. They're literally just doing menial labor, harvesting crops, picking pumpkins, sorting through things, loading things onto troughs, etc. It's honestly just not a big deal. It's literally just, like I said, community service. I mean, of course, they're still bound by these ball and chains, like typical outlaws, but otherwise, things seem to be fine. And ultimately, as the hours wind down, Greg and Wirt are on orders to dig holes, and so I think all they have to do is get these done, and they'll be on their way. But Beatrice does say that are you kind of worried that maybe why they're making you dig these holes? Maybe they're planning to throw you in them. And Wirt does try to just like brush it off, even say maybe we'll stay in Pottsfield. It seems pleasant here. Only for when Greg finishes his hole, he says, "Hey, I found buried treasure," which is a skeleton. Yeah, at this point, they think that they're going to be the next ones buried in the holes. As such, Beatrice says that she can get them out of their chains, but just as she's getting ready to do this, the Pottsfield congregation arrives and wants to check on their progress. As such, Wirt tries to distract them by saying, "Oh no, the holes aren't done. You see, we had these rocks," and I love what I find hilarious is that halfway through his story, Greg runs for it. But as he's still trying to find a way to finish the story, it turns out the skeleton from Greg's hole actually manages to rise up and starts dancing. And everybody in the congregation is like, "Oh, hey, nice to see ya!" At which point they give him a pumpkin that he places on his head, and Wirt realizes that all these people are skeletons. And sure enough, the hole that Wirt's in also has a skeleton that rises up, and they give him his own little costume. And so, well, with this community service over, Enoch asks Wirt if he plans to stay in Pottsfield, and Wirt says, "No, I think I'm just going to leave." And Enoch says, "That's fine. Everybody stays eventually." And so Beatrice asks why Wirt is still there. Turns out she did actually break through his ball and chains, and so he makes a run for it, meets up with Greg and Beatrice, and ultimately And ultimately, the quartet decide that maybe they should go see Adelaide, mostly because Beatrice says that even if she did help them there, they weren't really in danger, so she still has honor bound to help them. And so the group decides, yeah, we'll go see Adelaide, and maybe she'll be able to help us. And so the group venture off once more into the unknown to see what other wonders and mysteries await them. So yeah, those are the first two episodes of Over the Garden Wall, and I'll say that, like I said, these first two episodes do a good job at setting the tone for the remainder of the series. As the very first, like I said, the very first shot of the old grist mill is a frog playing playing a piano medley on yeah. The first shot is a frog playing a piano medley, and as he's playing it, we do see these little snippets of other portions of what we eventually learn are the unknown, of people who live in it, things that become important later, and we're never given full context on them in the beginning, but as the show goes along, you are given more details. But from the first episode, it definitely leaves you kind of scratching your chin and wanting to know more. At the same time, though, the song, what I like about it, and having this song and have it be delivered in such an odd way with such little snippets, it does well in creating mystery. Like, you get a sense that things are strange here, not threatening exactly, but strange. With that being said, there is still a sense of unease in these first two episodes, that there is just something off going on. Case in point, one of the first things that helps set the mood is, once again, when Wirt and Greg are walking in the woods. As while they're walking in the woods, things are dark and dark, but with very low colors. Maybe just a few background noises of the forest. Just dark shadows. And of the few bits of light you do get, it seems very strange. As when the woodsman ends up cutting down the Edelwood tree that we saw earlier, you can see bits of the black tar or black oil that already dripping off it. And when you can see one of the trees in the lantern light, it looks horrified, like it's in a frozen scream. Just throughout the whole episode, you just get a sense that there is something wrong. And the woodsman is a perfect example, but the woodsman's a perfect example of it, as he also feels off. Like, he doesn't ultimately, like, at the end of the day, he's not a threat. Even he admits that, like, even he shows the cases that he's not interested in hurting these kids. But at the same time, it's clear he doesn't want them there. He's kind enough to them because they're children, and he most likely sympathizes with their plight. But at the same time, it's clear that he doesn't think they belong there, and he really wants them to go. Obviously, it creates a sense of strange oddity, and also makes you wonder about the validity of the woodsman as a trusted source, a reliable ally, etc. And even by the end, Wirt and Greg, when they decide to go see Adelaide, think that maybe the woodsman might have just been full of it, as after all, he told them to go see it. He told them to go to the nearest town, and that town happened to be full of skeletons who were celebrating the harvest festival. So, maybe don't look at him. He's obviously maybe not. He obviously doesn't have it all there, as he seems to mumble, trail off into certain directions, and seems to mention things that just don't make sense. But at the same time, through all this unease, there's a sense of wonder as well. There's a sense that the unknown is, well, just that, the unknown. And yes, there is fear in that, but also curiosity. As throughout everything, there's a sense of things are not always what they seem. And that's exemplified in these first two episodes. When you meet the huntsman, he seems like a very threatening and disturbed figure, but ultimately he is kind and wants the boys to be safe, even if he does still seem off. There's also a sense that there is more to his story than he's letting on, as he talks about how his plight in life is to carry the lantern and light it with the oil from the Edelwood tree. But you don't really understand why that's the case. Why does he do it? Why does he need to keep the lantern lit? We don't really understand. But at the same time, he does seem to know a fair bit about the unknown. And the bits he does tell Wirt and Greg are enough to not only inform them of what to expect, but also the audience, revealing enough details about the unknown to give you a sense of what it is, while still leaving enough shrouded in mystery. Of course, he does still mention things that he thinks the boys should know about, including of something called the Beast. We never see the Beast in the first episode, but it's clear that it's supposed to be something that obviously the boys should not be running into, which obviously they shouldn't. I mean, if there's a creature out there called the Beast, it's not something I really want to run into. Obviously, with a name like that, I think at that point, the only way I'd go up to is if it turns out his name was, I don't know, if it was Chindy. Yeah, that's the only way I'd go up to it. If it was Chindy or Xander. Pretty much, that's the only way I'd go near it. Go near it, and at the same time, though, you're not revealed. Like, you don't only that's only the barest sense of what's going on. It still feels like a myth, and it definitely does help give you something to look forward to, but also at the same time something to be mindful of. And of course, as you know, with stories like this, you do know that eventually the boys will cross paths with the Beast, but just that's all. But this little bit of warning is enough just to give us a sense of what we're going to be seeing in the future, especially in regards to things are not always what they seem in the unknown. Like I said, the huntsman is huntsman's a good example of it. He seems threatening and out of place, but there's clearly a story there, and he does clearly want the boys to not get hurt. When we see what we think is the Beast, it looks like a big threatening animal, when in reality it's just a dog who wanted some food. Or in the case of Pottsfield, it looks like a nice little town, but there's clearly something up with it. And then when you learn that these people do seem like this weird, mysterious cult or whatever, in reality, they don't mean any harm. They are literally just skeletons. They're just skeletons. They're not there to do any damage. They're not there to cause any harm. They're just here to celebrate the Harvest Festival. And while there is a little undertone of there are some slightly threatening undertones when how they talk, especially with Enoch, and I love Enoch's voice. Like, he talks like this, kind of nice and cordial, but can be very threatening when the mood suits him so. I do kind of like that, and I do like how it sets things forward and does help emphasize that Pottsfield is a place you might not want to stay. But at the same time, there is still a sense of camaraderie and community with the people and townsfolk, especially when you learn that the people that they were having Greg and Wirt dig up were the life of the party for them. So I do like that. I do kind of like that. It's a very nice way of showcasing the unknown. That it's a place of mystery, of intrigue, of fear, of danger, but also wonder. And with that double-edged sword, it makes you cautious to explore it, but still but still wanting to. You'll take a few steady steps when entering it, but you're still going to keep taking those steps. And it's a good way of drawing viewers in to want to see more of the show, to see more of what the series has to offer. And I think that's a good way to start it. And I think it's a good way of fitting Halloween. In fact, going back to that, I think another reason why this helps create a sense of how this helps fit with Halloween is also not just the undertones and the theme of mystery and unknown throughout these first two episodes, but also kind of like the color. Again, the first shot of the scenery, the first shot of the first episode, besides the frog, when we see Greg and Wirt, is them walking through the woods. We see dark shadows. You see dark shadows. Hear the noises of the woods as that echoes around them. You see a woodsman chopping through trees that look like they're people frozen in screams, that look like they're bleeding black oil. It's honestly creepy. And then you see the wolf that you ultimately with the glowing eyes. That's obviously uneasy. And then you get to Pottsfield in the next episode. It looks like just a quaint little town. It looks like a little pilgrimage town, like a little pilgrim town. It's got like farms. It's got giant turkeys. Yeah, there's also a walking cat, which looks like a regular cat except it can walk on two legs. So there's obviously still some oddities to it, but it also kind of but even going through that, when you see Greg and Wirt wandering through the woods, because by that point the sun's up, you can see the autumn leaves growing through, and I love the contrast of the gold and orange and yellow of it. It creates a sense of autumn, and it definitely creates a sense of, well, the time of year of the spooky season of Halloween, etc. It really does well in setting the mood in that regard, and it definitely still feels like a show that would fit in with the other Halloween spooks and treats. So I like that. I think it does well in that regard. And of course, I should probably also talk about the main characters. The first two episodes of the series, I think, do a nice job of introducing Greg and Wirt through characteristics. Because we don't really see how Greg and Wirt enter the unknown. In fact, what I do like is that they establish that even Greg and Wirt don't know how they got here, because when Wirt stops and finally asks questions, he realizes, wait, how did we get here? It definitely feels off. It definitely feels strange, but it does well in establishing their personalities without giving us a proper introduction. Sorry if you heard something there. Chindi is lying right there, and she just made noises as she stretched. It was adorable. But like I said, basically, like I mentioned with Wirt, he's the older brother of the pair, and he pretty much is like between that awkward phase that most preteens go through. Still kind of a kid, but trying to be mature. And how that usually manifests with him is that he tries to take control and tries to think things through and be more level-headed, but at the same time, he's obviously in over his head. He's a kid wandering in a strange land that's literally called the Unknown, and one of the first places they visit is a town full of dancing skeletons dressed in pumpkins and straw. Yeah, he's obviously not going to fully grasp what they're doing. At the same time, he is still trying to keep things on a forward-moving path. He is trying to keep himself in his... He's obviously wants to find a way home, and he's doing his best to try and keep his brother in line so that they can accomplish this goal, even to the point where he does try to avoid any strange oddities that they encounter so as not to make things more complicated, like when they encounter Beatrice. He really just wanted to ditch her first chance he got, because he really did not know what she was, and what I like is that Beatrice has her own little passive-aggressive way of trying to repay that to him, so I like that. That's kind of funny. So there is still some character there, and Greg, of course, he's a typical kid. He doesn't really fully grasp that them being lost is a bad thing. All he really thinks is, oh, I'm with my brother. I got a pet frog. We're in the woods. Yeah, we don't know where we are, but we can keep exploring, and eventually we'll find our way home. And he's clearly, yeah, he's like Wirt. He's very much in over his head. But while Wirt is mature enough to realize that them being lost and in this strange land is a bad thing, for Greg, he acts like a kid. He just explores. He explores. He's curious about things. He jumps into barrels of hay. He says things without really thinking of the implications. He's just a kid. Kind of annoying, admittedly, but still a kid. There's enough manner, but honestly, I think it works. I've mentioned before how I don't really like annoying kids. Look at my any vlog about the Ben 10 reboot to see that. But I think Greg works in that annoyance you can feel a sense of innocence. Yes, he doesn't really know what's going on, but that also kind of makes it feel like that there's something innocent to him. He doesn't really understand. Yeah, he doesn't fully understand what's going on, but he also is trying to have fun and trying to just enjoy things and just kind of get the most out of life. He's just basically how a kid would react when seeing the world. They don't know the ugly parts about it yet. They don't really want to understand it. All they see is strange new adventure, and they want to see more. They want to learn. They want to grow. And I think Greg does a good job of showcasing that. Again, it's annoying in some regards, but in that annoyance there is innocence, and it does kind of make you appreciate him and want to see him get through things as well. Okay, so I like that. On top of that, we also get Beatrice. Beatrice is a nice little introduction. She's a bit rushed, I openly admit, as we see her briefly in the first episode, and then the second episode, she literally just forces her way into the group, which there's a reason for that I'll get to later. So I'll probably knock some things down for her. I'll knock some points down for that little rush nature. But what I do like is that she is kind of a hard ass, and she definitely is kind of cynical in a regard. And because of how Wirt initially reacted to her, she and him do kind of butt heads a little in the episode. I like that. It's cute. So I think that these episodes do well in establishing Wirt and Greg and their personalities, as well as Beatrice. As for the actual quality of the episodes themselves, I think they're both pretty good. The first episode, like I said, does a great way of creating a sense of unease from the outset, showcasing the frog with the opening title, having Greg and Wirt be lost in the unknown in the woods, the dark colors, the strange designs, the weird old man who's mumbling to himself, all that stuff. It really does well in creating a sense of unease and setting the tone for the rest of the series. That there is definitely danger and suspense around every corner, but also wonder, and that sometimes the darkness may not be as dark as you think. So I like that. I like how that sets it up, and it does well doing that with the old man, with the reveal of the beast, which was the wolf, and how things go. The fun nature of Greg as he doesn't really understand what's going on. Word as he tries to get everything wrapped around his head and try and think of a good plan going forward. And ultimately, how things end when they're sent on their way and told to find a civilization. And after that, the second episode I think does well in showcasing the whimsical side of the series, as we see Greg, Word, and ultimately Beatrice enter into this seemingly mysterious and abandoned town, and ultimately treated as hostile. But ultimately, the more time they spend there, the more they see that there really is nothing to fear. Okay, there's a slight tint of unease, especially when you learn that the townsfolk are in fact skeletons, but in that same regard, there is also whimsy. These are they're not doing anything to inherently harm the kids, and the reason they're even punching them at all is because they broke these laws. They didn't know they were breaking them, but they did break them. They destroyed some of their property, entered this party without any permission, kind of spoiled it. And that actually leads to a funny scene where Enoch is listing off the charges for destruction of property, breaking and entering, and disruption, and murder. It's like, murder! It's like, oh, no, sorry, not murder. Just the other stuff. I love that. That was actually funny. And again, when they learn that their punishment is just community service. And yes, the pumpkin-headed skeletons are watching them, but they're not doing anything. It's more like guard duty. I like that. It creates a sense of whimsy. Still some unease laced in there to keep you on your toes, but still some whimsy to make you curious and interested into seeing more, and like I said, seeing more of the unknown. What else this land has to offer, and what other trials and tribulations Greg, Word, and Beatrice will encounter on their journey. I like that. I think it works well. And I think it does well, and again, and like I said, drawing you in and wanting to see more of the series. So, yeah, give it that. So, I guess at the end of the day, both of these episodes I think are pretty good. They do well in introducing you to the setup for the series, establishing the main characters, setting a tone via lighting, designs, character quirks, etc., while also creating a sense of fun, laced with unease and mystery. I like it. It does well in keeping you on your toes while still drawing you in and wanting to see more. It's the main characters have their quirks, but ultimately are likable. There are mysteries abound that you want to see expanded on. There's some spooks and scares, but also some nice and fun adventure. Overall, the first two episodes of Over the Garden Wall are pretty good and do a good job in drawing you in and wanting to see more of the series. So, yeah, I think that's really all I have to say. I hope you enjoyed my inane ramblings, and tune in next week as we look at episodes 3 and 4. So, till then, I'm Samuel Johnson. I hope you have a good night, and happy Halloween to you.